Welcome to ST Drums TV. This is the second episode of our mini-series on the Sonor Phonic line. In the last video we went through all the catalogs and had a look at tom-toms, bass drums and hardware. In this video we will focus on the snare drum models, the main concept behind the Phonic series, as well as everything we forgot in the last video. Also you will learn how you can build your own replica snare using heavy beechshells by ST Drums. And, as you may have heard already, you will get an idea of what the Phonic drums actually sound like. In the last episode you were already introduced to our friend Jan Palkoskas, who is probably the guy with the largest arsenal of Phonic drums in Germany. We visited Jan for this video to get more detailed information about the drums. Another video about Jan and his collection can be found on our channel as well. Well, to start the video, we sat with Jan and talked about the main concept behind the Phonic drums, prices, and the value of Phonic drums today. Enjoy!
Maybe we can start at the beginning of the Phonic series.
Yeah.
You, with your background knowledge, you studied the topic and you have a very interesting take on the whole history of the Phonic series. Can you maybe talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, it was almost like a shift in paradigm. It's like the Phonic drums weren't just another line. They were actually the child of a completely new approach at Sonor. Sonor changed the management strategies, which also changed marketing, and most importantly, in the production. The whole factory has undergone a revamp. They bought new machineries, and assembly lines were more efficient and more professional. In a nutshell, everything was new, and that started in the early 70s. And in the early 70s they worked the champion and super champions on those new machines, and they were the predecessor of the Phonic line. The Phonic line was the result of all the experiences they made with the champion and super champions, and they wanted to be on another level concerning looking actually at the customer. Before that, Sonor was producing drums and the people were buying it, but now the customer was in the center of attention. So the catalog was called the drummer's drum. So the drummer was more important, and they realized we need a concept to be more flexible, have all those different shell varieties, the different finishes. I think it's actually a very early stage of customizing, and you could have the shells in different sizes. Later, 82, the Phonic Plus were introduced. All the parts were combinable, so you could buy a Phonic bass drum but combine it with a Phonic Plus tom. You had the single-headed concert toms, and there are drummers like the ABBA drummer I mentioned. He had standard Phonic and concert toms, and I actually play a combination as well. I've got a drum kit I play with where I play a Phonic Plus bass drum, 20-inch, but I use the short toms like 8 and 10 normal Phonics, and then a 15x17 floor tom. And that's the beauty of the Phonic Plus line, that you can all mix it together.
In the vintage scene, many people like old Ludwig kits.
Yeah.
They're very sought after. And on a German market, you know, there are lots of Sonor kits around. Mm-hmm. Could you talk a little bit about why you think Sonor and especially Phonic kits are as important as Ludwig or other American brands on the vintage market?
Well, talking about the significance of vintage drums, like everyone, not everyone, but most of the people love the Ludwig drums. And I must say they're beautiful. I mean, the iconic Ringo Starr Beatles drum kit, it made history, right? Mm. And other brands like, I've got to look something up here because I actually made a little note about this, claim to be the most recorded drums. Mm-hmm. Like the Recording Custom, Yamaha, these are vintage drums as well. Claim that. I mean, it can never be proved if they're the most recorded drums or not. And the Ludwig's Supraphonic, it's just such a versatile drum. Maybe it's the most recorded drum ever. But if you take into consideration who actually played Sonor Phonic drums in the 70s, it was AC/DC, 70s and 80s. It was AC/DC, it was Iron Maiden, ABBA. We're talking about like one of 3 biggest bands ever. And I've actually made a list who else played these drums. Even Vinnie Colaiuta, when he was in Frank Zappa, played Phonic. Motorhead played Phonic. The B-52s, Motley Crue, Hugh Lewis and the News. I mean, all these acts and these drummers of these acts actually played Sonor Phonic. So I've got a different claim. Phonic and Phonic Plus are maybe not the most recorded drums as other drum brands claim, but I think they are the most heard drums. When you think of airplay, how many airplays ABBA and AC/DC got and how many records were sold, I think that when you listen to everyday radio, you actually hear more Sonor Phonics than any Ludwig drum. Maybe I'm wrong.
Very interesting.
It's just a claim. I will never ever be able to prove it.
We encourage people to comment below the video what they think.
No. I'll be slapped for that one. Yeah.
If someone is getting started with the topic of vintage Sonor drums, and if they want to buy, let's say, a Phonic or a Champion or something similar, is there something they have to look for? Like, let's say, what comes in mind is like a crooked wing screw or something. Are there some places in the drums that sometimes are broken or people have to look out for?
Okay, I mean that is one of the. This is the main beauty of these drums. Spare parts are widely available. All parts are interchangeable, or most of the parts are interchangeable. And I've never seen a drum kit which is unrepairable. Yes, if they have got water damage. And I'm not talking about like a little rain, being exposed to a little rainfall, but if they were in a basement for years and they have got, and the shells got wet and they've got mold in them, there is a case where I would say like, don't consider buying them because it would be much too expensive to get them redone. I must say I've never really seen the hardware to be rusty. And even if you see a drum in a lovely shape and the finish looks awesome, but the hoops are dent, then get it and get other hoops. They are available. You could even get aftermarket hoops. So I would never, and even the lugs. You have other brands where the lugs break off and it's hard to replace them, because these lugs called the Einheitsstütze were produced for such a long time. You will always find them secondhand, and there's enough people dealing with them. Or you just buy another drum and change the parts.
Well, there's one shop I know.
Chris.
Another one.
And of course you. Yeah.
But also shout out to Chris Janakopoulos.
Sorry. But you specialize in many more different things as well. You have got the spare parts, and I very often buy like the tuning rods of you guys, and you deal with second-hand spare parts as well sometimes.
Yes. If a person in the late 70s, early 80s wanted to buy a new Phonic kit, how much did they have to pay back then?
Lights. It's also another misconception of these days when people like say like, oh, everything is getting so expensive. A drum kit back in the days of this quality did cost an arm and a leg. I've got like some old price tables here, and like the sound machine itself, we're talking about the huge configuration, equaled something like 5,000 Deutschmarks, or here even with 2 kick drums, 6,000 Deutschmarks. You could buy a proper car for that kind of money.
A new German-made car.
A new German-made car, definitely. I think this one This price list is from 1977, and for the price of a phonic sound machine, the sound machine is the configuration with all the toms ranging from 6 to 18. I think you could buy 2 Volkswagen Beetles for that price. So we're talking about big money. Yeah.
The Beetle in today's world is probably the Golf or a Polo or something like this. The new one is maybe like 40,000 or 40,000. So let's say double that, 60,000, 70,000 something.
Well,
if you compare it to cars.
Maybe to compare to cars, yes. It just shows how important these instruments were for people and how much they had to pay to play such a drum kit. And I think there's even that story about Nico McBrain asking Sonor if he could have a Sonor drum kit for free, and apparently Horst Link said, well, you can't ring Rolls-Royce and ask for free Rolls-Royce, you've got to pay for your drum kit. And Nico McBrain didn't have the money for it, so the management of Iron Maiden had to buy it because it was so much money, you know? Wow. And I think it's understandable if you see how much craftsmanship you build drums, how much work goes into a drum kit. And back in the days, everything was pretty much made at Sonor, even like the whole plating process, and it was all made in-house.
Well, now that we have all of this information from Jan, we will focus on the phonic snare drums. It is a bit hard to tell which model of the Sonor snare drums could be counted as the first phonic snare. In the 1975 catalog, the models D565 and D566 were paired with the phonic drum sets. In the pictures there are no badges shown, so I can't say for sure if they had Centennial badges on them, but our friend Martin Schneider has this old phonic snare in his collection with the old Centennial badge and the same hardware setup, so probably these snares started with this type of badge in 1975. These first snares, as well as the other phonic metal snares, had seamless shells made from ferromanganese steel. The earliest ones didn't have snap block inserts and used this large strainer that was previously used on other high-quality snares from the 70s. Some of these mid-70s snares did come with knurled nuts on the tension rods that you could use as an anti-detuning device. In the 1977 catalog you can see the model D505, and below the picture you can also see that they made similar metal snares in different heights with different names. The strainer used on these phonic snares was known by the beautiful name of 746-053-59, which is basically the most common strainer if people imagine a phonic strainer. By the way, if your strainer feels a bit unsmooth, check if this plastic part is still there. This is essential for the mechanism to run smooth. If it's not there, there is a 3D printed replica available at stdrums.com. Also, the strainer usually had some rubber padding on the top to avoid a metal clicking sound when the lever hits the on position. And then there was also the D525 with the same old school parallel strainer that the famous 426 had. A replica snare wire is still available at stdrums.com. The butt end that was found on all phonic snare models throughout the 70s and 80s was the 746-00659 Stimmbock, which made this snare kind of special with a fine adjustment thumb screw on the strainer and also on the butt end. My father used to say, "Boy, nobody needs a fine adjustment on the butt end if they know what they're doing." Somehow he was right, but still, it is nice to have a feature like that on a high-quality drum, and it's easier to recenter the snare wire once you messed up in the first place. Also, the snares had internal mufflers back then. The first time a wooden phonic snare showed up in the catalog was in 1978. This is the first time that we see the famous D515 and D516 mentioned in the catalog. These snares were covered with rosewood veneer inside and outside and had 9mm thick beechwood shells. As you can see in the pictures, these snares still had internal mufflers and now also had the famous snap lock inserts and regular steel hoops. The height of the D515 was 5¾ and the 516 was 6½ inches high. Let's step into the 80s and check what the catalogs had to say about the phonic snares. Looking at all of these phonic models in the catalogs, it seems like the serial numbers were read like this. 5 as the first digit was just the snares back then. 1 as the second digit was a phonic snare with a wooden shell. 0 as the second digit means a phonic snare with a metal shell. And then the last digit is the height of the snare. 5 stands for 5¾ 6 stands for 6½, and 8 stands for 8. However, the 515 was not mentioned in this 84 catalog. The D518 model used longer lugs that were also known from the light snares as well as marching snares from Sonor. All of these 80s phonic snares had 20 tension rods and steel hoops, and also they got rid of the internal mufflers and replaced them by external ones that could be clipped on the better side hoop. By the way, the same can be said about the toms of the 80s phonics. The wooden shell snare models in the 80s allowed the same finished choices as the toms and bass drums of the series previously mentioned. Another model that needs to be mentioned are the 518X models that were counted as part of the Phonic Plus series. Basically, it's the same 14x8 phonic snare, but it had two versions of the strainer with a big plastic base below and a rolling mechanism on the outside. Actually, the second strainer didn't have a lever, so it is basically just a button with fine adjustment, but in the longer strainer format. This setup is what we call a Pseudo-Parallelabhebung in German. As far as I know, this enables you to put longer snare wires on the snare. If you own a snare like this, please comment below if the wires sound better that way or if the mechanism has other advantages that I'm not aware of. Even though the phonic drums were discontinued in '87, it seems like the snares were still sold up until around 1990. Now let's pause for a second and board a plane to Japan, the land of the rising sun. Since their initial release, the phonic snare models were a big hit among the Japanese drum community. After the series was discontinued around 1990, Japanese distributor Komaki repeatedly asked Sonor if they could consider continuing the series for the Japanese market. And after a short while, Sonor agreed. We want to use this opportunity to thank Sonor and Komaki for letting us use their old catalogs to be able to recreate the history of these drums and their additions over the years. The data on the earliest reissues is a bit unclear and hard to recreate, but it seems like the time between the discontinued old model and the new re-release was very short. In the '88 Komaki catalog, the phonic drum sets and the snares from the original series are still available. In '89, you can still find the phonic wood snares, but also still the old metal snare models 505, 506 and 420. We don't have a catalog of 1990 available, but around that time Sonor officially discontinued the phonic series, like we already mentioned. The 1991 Komaki catalog already, or still, had the 515, 516, as well as the 505, 506, 508X, and 420 metal snares in there. The snares had the same hardware, but all of the models, except the 505, now had die-cast tubes. This is probably the first telltale sign of a Japanese reissue. If you got a phonic snare with the old strainer but die-cast tubes, it is most likely made after 1990. In the '94 catalog, the 508 is missing, but besides that, all the other 5 phonic models are still available. Below the pictures it states that the shells are 9-ply, 9mm thick, and the snares came with the Z5111 external muffler. In 1999, only the 515 and 516 were left when it comes to phonic snares. Still, both models featured the 9-ply 9mm shells and included an external muffler and a tuning key. And this is the first time that the catalog mentions an exclusive case that came with the snares. Even though the designer models already had the new upgraded smaller strainer, the phonic models in '99 still had the large vintage phonic strainer in this catalog. Then, in 2003, you can find the 515 and 516 with a new designer strainer and a simple butt end. Above the snares, the catalog states, since the introduction in 1975, the Sonor Phonic model is Sonor's worldwide most beloved snare drum series. Since the official production ended in 1990, these snare drums are exclusively manufactured for the Japanese markets. The shells still had 9-ply and 9mm thickness. The case and tuning key are still listed as accessories that were included, but this is the first catalog that doesn't mention the external muffler anymore. This setup from 2003 stayed basically on the Japanese market until the last major change in the lineup in 2012. Then, sometime around 2010, the rest of the world got curious. Why do the Japanese still get to buy these beautiful snares and we don't? Sonor answered quickly by re-releasing the snare models worldwide in the year 2012. So because of this, you can still buy brand new D515 and D516 snares even to this day, even though they were originally introduced in the late 70s. If you check the 2012 Komaki catalog, they also state the worldwide introduction of the snares. This is the first time that a change was made to the shell recipe. The models with palisander or rosewood veneer now had 12 plies, 10mm shells. The red mahogany ones have 9-ply, 8.5mm shells. On the worldwide market, the 515 is only available with a thick shell and rosewood finish, and the 516 is only available with a thinner shell and mahogany finish. Maybe as a little present to the loyal Japanese drum community, Sonor still offers the 515 mahogany and a 516 rosewood model exclusively for the Japanese market to this day. On the pictures of the 2012 catalog, you can see that the lugs still had the snap lock insert. Then, in 2014, the lugs didn't have the snap lock insert anymore. But the lugs got a rubber tube inside that acts as a tune-safe system. This lug is still used on the phonic snares today. Unlike other modern Sonor snares, the phonic snares still used the classic slotted tension rods. However, the thread is not the classical 1/4" thread anymore, but has the more widely available 732 or 1224 as Sonor calls them. In 2015 was the last time you saw the hard case, and in 2019 you can see this brand new super light case that came with the snares since then. Again, many thanks to Komaki in Japan, as well as Benny from Sonor to help us with the research on these details. Now that you know all of that about the Phonic snares, let us show you how we created our own homage to the Phonic snares. At ST Drums, we offer all the parts you need to build your own drums. Also, we have a long history in drum restoration. This year we introduced our own heavy 9mm and extra heavy 12mm beach shells to the market. Many drummers in Germany have at least one old Sonor steel snare in their arsenal. A widely available model that can be found pretty cheap is the D454. That was often paired with the Champion drums in the 70s. It had 8 lugs that look similar to the Phonic ones but without the snap lock, and it has an internal muffler, a trumpet lever throw-off and the same button with a fine adjustment that was used on the Phonics. Great hardware on an affordable snare. Well, how about we take one of our 9mm shells and cut it to 5 inches height, put a 45-degree bearing edge on there and drill it for the hardware of the D454. Then slap some replica Palisander Rosewood veneer on there, and in order to preserve the outside veneer, we made these special 3D printed TPU gaskets. The 454 shell had these special lugs with a gap in the middle. You could just use them like this on a flat wooden shell, but to make it a bit more fancy, we made their gaskets have this extra material in the middle to fill in the gap. By the way, all of the gaskets can be bought in our shop at stdrums.com as well. At the time of the production we had a replica Phonic batch in our workshop, so we thought this might be a good opportunity to use it on a snare. However, once I drilled, I realized that I failed. The Phonic batches were centered on the shells, however the hole in the batch is not centered on the batch, but slightly below the middle. So if you drill the hole for the grommet centered, like an idiot, like I did, the batch will sit a tiny bit too far up. Well, let's keep this between you and me. And I promise if I have to drill something like this again for one of you guys, I will not make the same mistake again. So now let's check the sound of this snare. In this demo, the snare is played with a 13, 16 and 22 Phonic kit that is for sale in our shop. In the second part of the video you can hear the drum set with a 14x8 snare that we built with a 12mm thick beech shell. Basically this is an homage to the signature snare models. It uses 10 performer lugs per side and a modern Sonor dual glide strainer. What a great snare! Like already mentioned, you can get the beech shells, the Palisander Santos veneer and the snare drum itself, as well as the gaskets in our webshop at stdrums.com. If you are interested in buying an original D515 or D516 reissue from Sonor, you can also contact us or the drum dealer of your choice. If you're looking for vintage Sonor spare parts, please also check our shop. And if you need something that you don't see, please send us an email. And now we will return to Jan for even more bonus information on the Phonics.
Yeah, talking about little details, this is a detail not too many people are aware of. There's actually 2 stages of this kind of bracket. Stage 1 or Mark 1 is the most prominent one, which is the one with the wing screw. And they are actually prone for breaking or wearing off. I mean, I love so much the durability and the stability, but this is somehow a little bit like the Achilles heel of the Phonic drums. It's these can tore off if you overstress them. And then there was a second generation before the new system came out, the new brackets came out. They already had the different approach here. You can see here it is built in, so these are actually much more sturdy and they're more easy to replace. And after that they went to that generation. Yeah, so it's 3 generations of floor tom and bass drum brackets.
So in the last video, we already got a bit into detail about the small tom sizes, that they are rare and not all of them are made from 9-ply beechwood.
Yeah.
But there are a few false friends. Like if someone on the used market finds what looks like a concert tom or bongos, it doesn't have to be phonic.
Ah, okay, interesting. I think the difference is, are they actually marketed as bongos or are they marketed as concert toms?
Okay.
With the phonic concert toms, you have wood shells, and they were always marketed as concert toms. But then later, not under the umbrella of the phonic range, certain bongos were sold, and also marching bongos. And so you can have these kind of concert toms, but they were actually bongos at some point. So they have a different, they had a different drum head. Here's a perfect example. So these were actually sold as bongos, and this is a very, very strange shell. This is original Sonor, but they wanted to make them as light as possible. So sometimes people want to sell you phonic, like a 6-inch tom, and when it comes with such a drum shell, this is not phonic. Yeah, so yes, in the phonic range there were different shell construction, but this is not phonic. The wood one is phonic.
And also the red bongos, identifiable, they don't have a badge, but they have the sticker with the Sonor logo, right? It's
Yeah.
usually the cheaper series had these stickers on them, right?
Yeah, I mean, this is, I guess, something like a transition. I mean, they work perfectly with the red drums here, so I actually don't mind them being different. But this one, if someone tries to sell you this one, keep your paws off.
The rarest and thinnest phonics of them all.
Horrible. Yeah. I mean, I consider them being kids' toys.
Yeah.
And I've got this one as a bad example, and I want to use the wrap. I want to get in contact with ST drums to actually build a 6-inch concert tom. But Jonas, we're going to talk about that later.
Okay. Now, speaking of the Sonor Phonic series, we got to mention the Rosewood series one more time, because by chance we have lots of Rosewood drums right now in our store, and I'm going to show you a few details on them right now. You can maybe practice your dating skills with me, and yeah, also you will get a little impression of these drums, and also you can find them at stdrums.com for sale. So we will start with the smallest drums. Actually right here we got the 8-inch and 10-inch concert tom from the Phonic line. As we saw in our first video, it got rosewood veneer on the outside and also on the inside. The shells are made from beechwood, but on the bottom you can see that they are slightly thinner compared to the larger sizes. Also they got the golden badges, 1875 to 1975. This means that they were probably released somewhere between 75 and 77. So these are among the first phonics and the first rosewoods. You may have seen the outside veneer is a little cracked on some places. Actually, we had to glue some of the veneer back to the surface and sand the edge a little bit to prevent the veneers from getting even looser and from splitting more. On these places where the veneer is missing, you can see the horizontal lines of the wood grain from the beechwood underneath. Also on the bottom you can see that the plies of beechwood are actually pretty thick. So this is also an indicator for a very early phonic, especially for these small sizes 6, 8 and 10. Because as we learned from Jan in the first video, these were made with peeled veneers. Also, these don't have snap lock inserts yet. So this is probably really from the first 1 or 2 years of the series. What's interesting, if you look on the inside, the 70s rosewoods actually don't have the date stamp in there. So on these it's harder to tell how old they are. Probably because of the darker wood veneer, the stamp would not have been visible, and that's why they left them out. Yeah, so it's a bit harder to date them just by looking at the stamp. But yeah, like I said before, looking at the hardware, it is possible to indicate. We got the badge and also we got the missing snap blocks, which also speaks for a very early phonic, maybe 75, 76. Now another drum This is a 14-inch tom-tom. You can see the veneer is quite a bit lighter compared to the 8 and 10-inch. This doesn't mean that they're not original. In this case, it just means back then they used real rosewood, and from tree to tree the wood has a different shade, and especially with veneers like that, there's quite a bit of variation in the veneers they used. So if you're looking to play phonic rosewoods, not all of the vintage ones that you buy will automatically match in color. So like I said, this is maybe one of the lightest possible versions that you can see of these phonic rosewoods. Also golden badge, 1875 to 1975, and as we mentioned also in the first video, 2 mufflers, better side and reso side. I was always interested what these mufflers actually do on the reso side, so here's a little sound demo for you. So now a little disclaimer before we start the test. Like I said before, with the snap lock system it's not too easy to tune these drums, so the tuning is not really perfect. It's just some kind of tom tuning I started with. I will just play with one stick and then slowly, first of all, dial in the better side muffler, and then I'll dial in the other one, and then keep it at, yeah. You will realize if you dial it in too heavy, it will just kill the sound, but yeah, if you got it kind of in a sweet spot, it will just shorten the sound. Now we got the better side free again, and then we will just turn in the reso side. Now that's the tom sound. Maybe another interesting point, the felt mufflers, on the outside they look the same on all the phonics, but in the inside you can see that the tom-toms had a small felt, maybe like 4 centimeters in diameter, and the floor toms used a larger felt, maybe around 6 centimeters in diameter. And as we are speaking right now, with this configuration we got a 12-inch, 13-inch, 14 and 15-inch. So they got all kind of a lighter veneer. The 12 and 13 are a bit darker, but all of these with that setup, 2 mufflers and a golden badge. Also, I think with our last video we caused a little bit of confusion about these veneers. I don't know if it's confusion or clarity that we caused, because we showed you in the last video that there was a newsletter from Sonor from 1981 that offered also Nussbaum veneer, which means walnut. So as we mentioned in the video, no other Sonor collector that we asked has ever heard or seen anything about these walnut veneers. And one customer actually contacted us. He has a kind of in-between era kit, something between a champion and a performer. So speaking early 80s. Yeah, it might be that this was actually a prototype shell with walnut veneer, but looking at these very light skin, looking at these very light rosewood drums, it might also be some variation of rosewood. We are not completely sure. But to add to the confusion, there is one more veneer that I want to show you, also mentioned in the other video, but we didn't have a real example yet that we can show you. So I hope you can see this and still hear me. This one is an 18-inch floor tom shell with rustic oak veneer. So if you check this and compare the color, and also have a look at this, it's kind of a similar direction. Also the grain orientation is the same. Or they're quite heavy with one arm, but it's different. Yeah, I think oak is pretty easy to tell because also the roughness of the veneer, and also oak has a kind of predictable pattern. Rosewood is a little bit more wild. But yeah, just to show you the comparison, even the oak ones, if you have a rustic oak, can look kind of like a rosewood. And if this walnut ever existed, and if this in the picture was a walnut veneer, then also it looks kind of similar to the lighter rosewood. So now to the 12-inch, or actually to the whole bob kit that we got here. You can compare it to the 14-inch that I just showed you. The veneer also is a little different. The stripes are a little thinner on this one. This one is a little darker. It also got the two mufflers, but the badge is not the 1875 to 1975 version, but actually just says since 1875. So again, this one is a little later model, maybe starting at 77, 78. You can also see it got snap lock tension rods and lugs, which also speaks for a later version compared to this. But I think it's still a good match. If you are going for a large kit, you can still combine these. And people who are not the absolute Sonor nerds will not even recognize the difference. And if you ask me for my personal taste, I'm not the biggest fan of the snap lock lugs anyway. To me, a little readjusting of the tuning is something normal. It's not a big problem. It's harder actually to change a head with the snap lock inserts, but I think I told you this in another video before. And this is kind of the newest rosewood shell that we got right now. Actually, these two, both of them are 13 inches. You can see the badge. The genuine rosewood veneer is on there. This is the more neutral badge that we showed you before. The lugs already got the larger mallets on them. And we got this shape of tom mount. I think on this one, the inside veneer is particularly beautiful. And also this is a perfect example to show you the difference between the 70s and 80s rosewood. This is an 80s one and it got a date stamp on the inside, 407. So this is from July 1984. Also you can see here that the screws have washers under them. It's a bit hard to tell, but I think usually the cheaper and earlier Phonics had no washers, and I think maybe the later ones got the washers under there to kind of protect the wood. But yeah, still, if you remove the screws, you will have some indentations in there. It's not avoidable even with the best washers they used back then. So one more quick details about the Phonic drum shells is the muffler placement. On the 70s tom-toms, you have the side with the badge and the mufflers to the opposite side of the tom mount, which means it was mounted like this, and then as a player you had the chance to have the mufflers on your side. With the floor toms it was different. You have in the center one badge to the front, then right next to it you got the front feet. If you rotate the drum, you see that right on the opposite side of the badge you got the third leg, and then on the side you got the mufflers. So this means the mufflers are not really symmetrical to the whole thing, but they're a little off to the side, but actually they're in a place that are closer to the drummer, so also they are kind of reachable while playing. You see like this? This is facing the audience, my leg is right here, and I got the mufflers on this side.
And now back to Jan, who will show you some more details about the mahogany and oak veneers.
So in the first video we talked in detail about all the different finish and veneer choices.
Yeah.
And there was a brief period in the early 80s where they had a large focus on different veneers and reduced the wrap choices.
Yeah.
And one famous one is the mahogany, and you have many drums with the mahogany finish.
Yeah.
And you just mentioned one detail about the top row. There were different mahogany finishes available actually for a brief period.
Yeah, because all the veneers by nature, they look different, and you can never find like perfect matching veneers anyway. But Sonor had two variations, like red mahogany and dark mahogany. And this is dark mahogany and red mahogany. They look different in daylight, but the contrast is not too bad. So I personally combine red and dark mahogany, but they had the same thing with the oak veneers as well. There was the normal oak veneers down there. Maybe you can see the finish. There's a 18 and a 22-inch bass drum. So they had normal oak and rustic oak, but the rustic oak looks really, really different. So that's a bit complicated to combine. But yeah, those finishes are beautiful. The grain is amazing, and I think they're actually timeless. They look as modern or as classic as you want them to appear.
Wow! Again, that was some quite detailed nerdy information about the Sonor Phonics. If this was our first video that was recommended to you, make sure to check out part 1 about the Phonics series and also the separate interview of Jan Palkoskas on our channel. We are planning more videos like this in the future, for example a video on a teardrop series, as well as other Sonor snare drums are already in preparation. We here at ST Drums are not only experts in vintage Sonor drum repairs and restoration, we also build custom drums, customize and repair drums by other manufacturers, sell drum parts like lugs, shells and wraps, but we also have a high-end snare line called Stegner Instruments that you can check out on our channel. We try to capture a bit of the timeless Sonor spirit of the 70s and 80s, combined with modern techniques to build the best drums possible. Also, we celebrate our 30th anniversary this year. We have a big event on July the 5th in the southwest of Germany near a small town called Pirmasens, so if you're interested in that, check out stdrums.com or any of our social media pages. So again, thanks a lot for watching. Please subscribe and comment below to help us gain more attention here on YouTube and make more videos like this in the future. Well, I forgot one more thing. Sometimes we get comments from German viewers who ask us why we don't release many videos in German language. Well, if I recorded everything in my native language in German, the world would not be able to hear the following outtakes. And floor tom prism clamps, and floor tom prism clamps with 3 screws, and floor tom prism clamps with 3 screws are 80s hardware.